Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott. When mirrorless cameras first came out, the idea in many people's minds behind them was that these were going to be smaller, lighter alternatives to DSLRs while providing similar levels of performance and image quality. Of course, as we have seen since that point, that in many cases, lenses designed for at least full-frame mirrorless cameras like the Sony A7R Mark III that I've got here, they have typically been as large and in some cases even larger than the equivalent lenses for DSLRs. But there are a few lenses that fit the original concept of what mirrorless should be, at least for some people, and that is to be a small and light alternative. And if that is you, you're looking for high quality lenses that are going to give you a much smaller form factor than equivalent DSLR, then the Zeiss Loxia lineup of lenses may just be for you, so long as you don't mind manually focusing. Case in point here, and while it's not the same maximum aperture, I have got the Loxia 35mm f2 lens mounted on a full frame Sony A7R Mark III. And here I have the Canon 35mm f1.4L Mark II mounted on a Canon 5D Mark IV. And so yes, the maximum aperture is not exact. However, it would not be incredibly different if I had Canon's 35mm f2 IS or the Tamron 35mm f1.8 VC mounted on the Canon here. As you can see, this certainly fulfills the idea of a smaller, lighter kind of setup. Now, before I break out into individual looks at each one of these lenses, which I'll be doing as a part of this review series, I wanted to just give you a few things as a whole about them. The Loxia lenses, as noted, they are manually focusing lenses. They are made all of metal to, Zeiss's highest grade. I mean, think of these as being equivalent of the Zeiss Milvus lenses, except for in a very, very compact form. All metal construction, weather sealing, all of those things. Now, one thing about the Loxia lenses is that they are designed really with somewhat of a hybrid approach in mind. These are particularly good lenses for filmmakers. And so not only are they fantastic lenses optically for shooting stills, but these really are designed in many ways around the idea of doing actual film work and video work where a quality manual focus lens is often preferred. Let me give you just a couple of the highlights of why that is. Number one, you can get this little tiny tool here that will allow you to, on the actual lens mount, there is a little point where the tool is inserted. And so you can very quickly make the change from either a traditional clicked aperture, where each one of the stops is defined, and there are also 1/3 stops in between the major stops. But you can also then rotate it to the opposite position, and there you can have a declicked aperture that will run through the aperture incredibly smoothly. This is as good as what I've seen. Not surprising. Zeiss does all this stuff very, very, very well. And so you can declick the aperture. For filmmakers, that can be a big deal because you might want to rack aperture or make aperture changes and you don't want to introduce movement. You want it to be very smooth. The other thing that is a part of this process is that Zeiss has designed for these lenses, this is called the Lens Gear Mini. The Lens Gear comes in a variety of sizes, but this is designed to provide a kind of a typical gearing size for those that want to do a focus follow or something similar to where they're going into a geared system. So Zeiss has designed all of these lenses to where this can fit on there and it will give you the standard gearing size. One thing I really like about Zeiss's approach here is that this is a toolless system. There is a ring here at the front that you can kind of grip, and holding the other, you can just rotate this, and what it does is it tightens it down, and so that you can easily get the fit and adapt it to different circumference sizes. And so of course once that is on, you can then have that on a focus follow system, and it's going to help you a lot for filmmaking. And so as you can see, all of these lenses in the series are very compact. Now, there is one new lens that has been introduced. It's a 25mm f2.4 that I don't have on hand. I have the original 4 here, and so that includes a 21mm f2.8. It includes the 35mm f2, a 50mm f2, and then finally an 85mm f2.4, all a part of this series. Now, in this case, these are all actually a part. You can get them as a set for filmmakers that comes in, a kind of a Pelican style hard case that is all, kind of custom molded and fitted inside to hold all of these. And so, a very neat kind of way to bring your gear along there. One final thing I want to note before I break out into individual and give you a closer look at each one of these lenses is the fact that because of this compact size, I can actually fit this entire kit in this little Peak Design Everyday 5L bag that can be carried as a shoulder bag or even as a waist bag. And so you can actually have a full frame setup with 4 different lenses in a very compact bag or space like that. All right, let's take a closer look at the Loxia 35mm f2. And so as you can see, a standard, kind of squared off lens hood, except for unlike most of your lens hood, this is all metal materials, very nicely flocked inside with a, kind of a felt-like material. And so it's gonna keep stray light from bouncing around in there. And one thing I really love about these Loxia lenses, when you reverse the lens for storage, look how tight that is to the barrel. It makes the whole profile of the lens extremely compact. I really like that. Lens cap itself, is a pinch style, as you can see. Looking at the front of the lens here, you can see that this is a Biogon design, which, all of Zeiss's different optical formulas, they are, well established. And so, the way that the actual optical design is Biogon, it's a 35mm f2. And like other lenses in this series, it sports a 52mm front filter thread. That, of course, is all in metal, and as is everything else here. This is all metal and glass in the design. And so looking on, you can see it is that anodized metal, kind of a satin finish. Focus ring on this is just, you really have to feel it to believe. It is just unbelievably smooth, perfectly damped. Perfectly smooth. This makes manual focus really a joy. And you've got, as you can see, a fairly long focus throw that gives you plenty of room for precision in focusing. You can see here that you've got some hyperfocal aids there. And of course, all along here, you've got etched in, not painted on, but etched in, you've got all of the various focus distances. The actual focus ring itself here is made all out of very finely ribbed metal. This thing is going to last forever, and it is just beautifully crafted there. Finally, looking down here at the aperture, it has a manual aperture ring, and unlike many manual aperture rings, it actually moves in 1/3 stop increments instead of just, full stops there. And so that gives you more precision over the aperture that you are going to select. If we look at the rear of the lens here, of course, this is a Sony FE mount. It's compatible with full frame. You can see that there are electronic contacts here. And so what that means is not only is the XF information passed on, but the moment that you begin to input focus here, it will be transmitted to the camera. The camera will zoom in the center portion or whatever portion you select of the frame, and so that you can either in the viewfinder or on the LCD screen, and so that you can more effectively focus and visually confirm not autofocus, but visually confirm focus there. That's always a very handy thing, and so I'm glad that's included on this. You can also see right here on the lens mount, that is where you stick in the Declick tool if you want to declick the aperture for filmmaking, or maybe it's just your preference is to have a declicked aperture, but you can just smoothly rack through the aperture itself, and so great for racking aperture for video work, or if you just want to smoothly change aperture without using any kind of traditional stops there. And of course, one other thing you're going to see is a nice thick weather sealing gasket here. There are also internal seals. This is a premium lens, and of course it has a premium build all the way around. And so one thing that I do want to show you, I'll put it on the camera here, and I just do want to highlight one kind of criticism that applies to a number of these Loxia lenses. Now, first of all, let's look at, I mean, that's a beautifully compact combination right there, and it balances very nicely on the camera. The lens itself, it weighs in at 340 grams, or basically right at 12 ounces. And so it's, you know, for being so compact, it does have some heft, and that's because of all the premium metals that go into it. The lens itself is 2.44 inches in diameter, and it is 2.3 inches long. That's 62 millimeters in diameter, and right under 60 millimeters in length. It does have optical formula of 9 elements in 6 groups. You can focus down with this lens to a minimum of 30 centimeters. And you can then, that's right under 12 inches basically. And there it has a reproduction ratio of 1 to 5.8 or 0.17 times. And so, you know, not fantastic, but certainly useful. The one criticism that I do want to levy here is actually when it comes to unmounting. The main part of the barrel that you might grip here, it moves. The other place where you might grip here is a manual aperture ring, and it moves. So the byproduct is that even after you've pressed the release and you go to unmount the lens, you basically have to kind of grip with your whole hand because everything rotates, and until it gets all the way over to one side, it can actually be quite difficult to unmount the lens because there's nothing solid to hang on to. And so just a minor criticism, but certainly a criticism nonetheless. Now, one thing that the Loxia 35mm f2 lens is not is cheap. It rings in at $1,300 US, and so it's certainly not an inexpensive lens. However, it is a premium lens, and so if you want a premium lens in terms of its build and its performance, maybe particularly if you're a filmmaker, this is a lens that, you know, it's not cheap, but it's not cheap in any sense of the word. Not in its operation, not in its optical performance, and of course, not in its build. And so as you can see, the Loxia 35mm f2 is a beautifully made lens. I mean, everything works Zeiss, which is to say it works perfectly. And the fact that you have such an amazingly compact lens made from such premium materials, including the full-on weather sealing, it makes this lens a very special one in terms of its build and its design. And if you don't mind manual focusing, you're not going to find any nicer manual focusing lens than is this one. If you'll look in the description down below, you can find linkage to my image gallery, and you can find a number of images there that can start to give you a sense of how the lens performs, its beautiful color rendition, its very artistic and nice bokeh rendering, and so just a lot of goodness there. So check that out, and check back regularly because I'm going to be adding images to it throughout this review period. On top of that, of course, you can find buying links if you'd like to purchase one for yourself. You're looking for beautiful and compact for your Sony, E-mount system. And of course, you can also find links there to follow me on social media, become a patron. And if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.